Now that Christmas is coming on, there's just kind of one thing that I hope Santa grants in my college football wish list, and that's if you think it, say it. And that's all there is to it. If you think something, whether it's a coach, player, administrator, school, university, fan, booster, whoever, if you think it, say it. There's nothing I hate more than having a coworker that will be that person that will say after the fact, after everything has all played out. That's how I thought that was going to go. Well, that's how you thought that was going to go. Maybe say something before it goes that way. And I think we've seen a couple of aspects of that in college football, specifically this season, where one, in the Michigan sign stealing allegations, there was the kind of consistent reporting that, several schools in the Big Ten had thought that this was going on, and that everybody in this and every coach in the conference knew that this had been something that was continually happening at Michigan. But nobody said anything. Well, nobody wants to hear after the fact, after it's come out, like, yeah, we thought that was happening. Because that sounds like you're doing a disservice to your football program, your players, your university, your fan base. If you think somebody's cheating, get it out there. Let them know. Say something. The idea that, like, we were afraid that we'd be kind of viewed as, like that we were whiners. Well, you're viewed as whiners after the fact that, we thought this was happening, but we didn't say anything about it. Why did you not say anything about it? That doesn't make any sense. It's a similar thing with Florida State and the ACC, the new members of Cal, Stanford, and SMU, that once they were announced, hey, Florida State never said a word about it until they file a lawsuit against the ACC trying to get out of the conference, and then we're real pissed about this. We didn't want them at all. Why didn't you say anything? I understand the idea of we need to have we need to be in lockstep in our messaging, blah, 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 blah. I think that's poppycock. If there are 4 schools in the ACC that are saying, hey, we don't want Cal, Stanford, and SMU, then those schools should come out and say, hey, we don't want Cal, Stanford, and SMU. If you think somebody in your conference is cheating at the game of football, I think you have a duty to say something. Now, I think it's pretty much mostly unscathed there for the Big 12 SEC, but I just don't understand how you continue to sit idly by and do nothing if you think that there is a school that's going above and beyond in its search for a competitive advantage. But then 2, if Florida State didn't want SMU, Cal, and Stanford in the ACC, if you come and that it's a big enough thing that makes them consider whether they are in the right conference going forward, that's part of Florida State's kind of legal case against the ACC is they did this and we don't like it. And I've said before, the break of before Christmas, that Florida State's kind of legal standing, right? Their legal case, what they're staking their claim on is we were mildly inconvenienced before, but we're real pissed now. Not really a way to win a lawsuit when you're hanging your hat on the idea of, like, we didn't want to be in this conference for a while, but now we really don't want to be in this conference. Okay, that doesn't. But it's a lot easier way to get out of that conference if you're that dissenting voice in public at all times. If you can turn the public perception in your favor, and make no mistake about it, that's what kind of these people are. That's their jobs, is to spin things in the way you want people to see them. That's the job of people working in public relations and people working in sports information departments, etc. That's the whole reason their profession exists, is for you to think something is much more impressive, much more important than it actually is. That's why they exist. So if Florida State comes out after the fact and says, I'm really not happy about the addition of Cal, Stanford, and SMU. Well, if you didn't say a damn thing about it while it was happening, people don't really have a ton of sympathy for you after the fact when you then bring up, like, hey, I don't like this very much. Nobody likes that revisionist history, that person who comes back later and says, I was thinking that at the time, but I didn't say anything because I was kind of worried that how you guys would respond. You're Florida State. Or in the Big Ten's case, you were Ohio State and Penn State. If you think your opponent is cheating, I don't know what more you need to come out and say, hey, this is happening. Because at the time, you might deal with some initial pushback. You might deal with some people being like, because that's a weird thing to just start lobbying out there. Or the Greg Schiano halftime report on the Big Ten Network where he's talking about there's some funny things going on out there, and then there's no follow-up question. And then after the fact, somebody says, well, he was talking about the officiating, and because everybody's afraid to look like a whiner, look like a troublemaker, etc. If you believe what you believe, stand firm in your stance and say, hey, I don't want SMU, Cal, and Stanford in our conference. Because you're probably not alone. Very rarely is somebody the only person thinking this one thing. So if Florida State says, I don't want Cal, Stanford, and SMU in the conference, and they say it publicly, that emboldens North Carolina and Virginia Tech and Clemson to come out and say the same thing. And if you want what you want, and I will die on this hill that there are schools that make conferences, right? Does Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Nebraska carry more weight in the Big Ten than Purdue, Illinois, Indiana, Minnesota, Rutgers, Maryland? Yeah, they do. Does Miami, Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech carry more weight in the ACC than Syracuse and Louisville and Boston College and North Carolina State and Wake Forest? Yeah, they do. You can go down each conference. Does Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, LSU carry more weight than Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, South Carolina? Yeah, they do. And so sometimes you just got to put it on the table and let them see how big it is. And you got to throw your weight around every once in a while, I think, because you have all the leverage. Everybody in those conferences knows who's driving the bus and who's hanging on. They know. They're not stupid. They can pretend as if they're all on equal footing. We're all equals in this 14-team, 16-team, 18-team conference. You can pretend that all day long, but they know at the end of the day, Washington State and Oregon State were not blindsided by the fact that they got left behind. They knew, and everybody knew, that should that thing go to crap, that those were going to be the two left holding the bag. It was not some shock to them that they are still regrouping from the trauma that they suffered because they were blindsided by it's just not true. Everybody in every conference knows their hierarchy, their standing inside those conferences. And sometimes you just got to put it on the table. I had a similar thought during the COVID year of 2020 when there were some schools in the Big Ten that didn't want to play football, and there were other schools, namely Ohio State, that thought they had a national championship caliber team that were strongly in support of playing. Sometimes you just got to throw your weight around. And if you are afraid to do that, I question the leadership from the athletic department, from the university standpoint, because either you don't know that you have that leverage, you have that weight, you have that swanging thing to throw around. And that's a problem if you don't know that you have that, or you're hesitant to use it because it might upset somebody else. Who cares? It's a dog-eat-dog world. It's cutthroat. College sports is a business, whether anybody wants to admit it or not. It is. It is a business, and now it is a billion-dollar business. And you didn't get to where you got in your university's hierarchy, or those universities didn't get to where they were by being nice, playing nice, not cannibalizing the Pac-12 when the opportunity arises. You got to do what you got to do. And so Florida State felt so strongly that they didn't want SMU, Cal, and Stanford to join their conference, which I think they're probably fair in feeling that way. And if there were other schools inside the conference, maybe that doesn't come to fruition. But if you're so staunchly opposed to it that in your legal filing of trying to get out of your conference, you basically trash SMU to the point of like, they're not in a power conference. They've never been in a power conference, and they were never going to be in a power conference unless we bailed them out. Say that publicly before it becomes a gigantic issue later on down the road. And now you kind of look like you're grasping at straws saying, see, I didn't want these guys here in the first place. Well, you were conspicuously silent when the whole thing was coming down. When all this was transpiring, there wasn't any reports of Florida State doesn't really want this to happen. You have people to do your bidding for you. Like, college football media has become so centralized on a team-by-team basis where anytime somebody reports something that might make a team, a school, university, program look bad, that person has to deal with death threats. So college football is so like anti NFL, where you get kind of like in a lot of other sports where it's not so much regionality of coverage as it is specific team by team by team by team coverage, where you got a couple of folks who do national reporting. You Bruce Feldman, Pete Thamel, Heather Dinich, Brett McMurphy to a slightly different level, Adam Rittenberg, Pat Forty, a couple of other guys. And then it is team by team by team. Very rarely is it conference by conference. You could argue like Paul Feinbaum is a conference by conference guy, but there's not really an ACC guy. There's not a Paul Feinbaum of the Big 10, Pac-12, Big 12. It is flat out, who do you care about? And it is team specific. Ohio State has 30 different media. Michigan has every school. Florida State is one of those schools that has a couple of different strictly Florida State media outlets. And there wasn't any real consternation. And if you feel so strongly to run down SMU and Cal and Stanford to a slightly lesser extent, just because like they've been in a Power 5 conference, they have played, Stanford's won more national championships than anybody. That's not necessarily Florida State's big. It was SMU. It was like, we're splitting checks with SMU now. We're splitting checks with SMU. And if that's how you feel, say it. Whether it's the president, athletic director, head football coach, big-time boosters, you all have access to get your message out there. And if you don't use it at the time, I don't feel a ton of sympathy for you. If you come back later and go, well, what I really felt at that time was, you had your opportunity. You had your opportunity. And you didn't take it. I can't feel bad for you. I feel bad for Florida State right now that it certainly appears as if they're going into the Orange Bowl, and we're going to talk about this later this week. They're going into the Orange Bowl to get trounced by Georgia. They are being put in a situation to set up to fail, and that sucks. And we'll have to hey, just because they're going to lose the Orange Bowl to Georgia does not mean that makes the college football playoff correct in their decision-making. But if I have one wish for 2024 going forward, is if you think it, say it. And if you can back it up, say it even stronger. Every college football program last week got their guy during National Signing Day, except we know that that's not the case. We're not stupid. Don't spit on my cupcake and tell me it's frosting. You didn't get every one of your guys. There are schools that had players flip on signing day, that you had planned to have that guy be a member of your class. Now he's playing somewhere else. You didn't get your guy, and that's okay. You can say, yeah, we had some defections late there at the end that made it a struggle. We were really looking forward to this kid, whatever the topic is, no matter how controversial, no matter how outlandish, flamboyant, whatever. Now, I reserve the right to pick that apart. I reserve the right to say, I think you're wrong, and here's why. But the idea that like being super vanilla from a coaching standpoint, from a player standpoint, athletic directors, university, social media departments, whatever, is the right way to go. Like, no. In 2023 and going into 2024, there is a gigantic portion of the population that has put an emphasis on authenticity, being genuine. We like to see behind the curtain. We like to see real personalities. That's what makes the game fun. That's what made the Texas A&M game, Texas A&M and Alabama, when Jimbo Fisher was basically like, hey, Bama's buying kids. Or Nick Saban says, the only reason these kids are going to Texas A&M is because they're throwing fat stacks of cash at them. And Jimbo Fisher comes back and basically says, shut your mouth and I'm going to shut it for you. And I've said this before on the podcast, you can pretend as if you are watching a certain game just because you like football and you think it's a good football game. We like storylines. The reason professional wrestling works is because of the storytelling aspect. And college football, I think, needs more of it and better of it. And the only way to do that is to get more guys like your Lane Kiffins, Nick Sabans, Jerry Kills, who retired over the weekend, which I think stinks. The people who are unafraid to say what they believe needs said are what is going to propel college football forward. And you get these homogenized, vanilla blanket statements of Florida State is proud to welcome SMU into the Atlantic Coast Conference, blah, blah, blah. And then 3 months later, not even 3 months later, are like, these mother effers were never going to be in a Power 5 conference till we threw them a lifeboat. We think they suck. They're trailer trashing our conference up. Get them out of here. Well, how did you turn that quickly? Oh, because you felt that way all along? Then don't tell me that you felt differently when behind the scenes you're like, this sucks. If you think it sucks, say it sucks. If you think it's awesome, say it's awesome. If you think it, say it. And if you have to deal with the repercussions of being real, truthful, genuine, authentic, so be it. That's just what I think. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Back at it tomorrow here on Saturday Glory. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing. So if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. We'll be back at it tomorrow right here on Saturday.